event is sponsored by the Office of the Provost. So remember that. Thank the Provost when you see him. Otherwise, we don't get any more money. So it comes from him and then from the English department where we have found some money. And we thought we'd do something different than what we usually do and get people who do things instead of teach things. We've got Phoef Sutton. That's the handsome guy. And he has got, what, 2 Emmys? 2 more nominations. Executive writer, producer for Cheers, for Boston Legal, for all kinds of other stuff. And now is writing mysteries and ghost stories, both of which are excel over there. And then we've got Goldberg, who, same sort of scenario.
I don't have any awards. Nothing. My wife won't even give me an award for best dish dryer. I got nothing. He's got Emmys, Writers Guild awards, Humanitas awards. Did you discover the cure for some disease as well? No. Essentially, whether you're writing situation comedies or hour-long drama, we're doing the same thing. We're telling stories that are told visually, as opposed to what you might write in a novel. To move the story forward, everything has to be conveyed through action and dialogue, or the audience doesn't know what's going on. And that's a lot harder than it looks. That's why they pay us the really big bucks, unless you're working for Lamar. Yeah.
But it's you know, a lot of it's the dialogue and situation comedy certainly, because it's basically you're writing a play. Basically, you're writing a play with entrances and exits. It's a little bit different with hour-long drama because then you're doing short individual scenes that convey the meaning.
A screenplay isn't written for people like you to read, or really for anybody to read. A screenplay is written for all the other people to know what they're supposed to do. For the actors to know what they're supposed to say, for the director to know what he's supposed to shoot, for the set builder to know what he's supposed to build, for the location manager to find out what location he's got to find, for the transportation guy to figure out how he's going to get all these people to these places. It's a working document that's supposed to make other people creative and imaginative. So not only do we have to tell a story, we have to write a blueprint, a foundation from which other people can do their very best work.
What is the difference between writing for film, screen, and TV?
He's looking at me.
I've written for film and I've written for TV, and I don't feel there is essentially a particular difference other than you have to tailor for the act breaks and tell the story. You may feel that there is a huge difference.
I think there is a difference. You're all trained, whether you know it or not. The reason I've given this a lot of thought because I do, one thing that Jim didn't mention is I do a lot of consulting overseas. Right? I meet with studios and networks in Germany, Sweden, France, England, Belgium, and teach them how to do American-style television. And the thing they're dealing with, they have the budgets and they have the actors, but what they don't understand is the storytelling. And all of you, whether you're aware of it or not, have absorbed the 4-act structure. You expect TV shows to be told with that structure. If it doesn't, you feel something lacking. Whereas a movie is the classic 3-act structure, and it's structured a little bit differently in the way the story unfolds. In television, the way Phoef just described it, you're working toward the act breaks. There are all these mini climaxes in a TV show. TV show is almost like tantric sex. Anyway, it's all these little mini climaxes and all these builds. Every scene has to move the story forward and develop a conflict in a different way. And it's a different kind of storytelling. And I find that it's actually helped my novel writing quite a bit. That the way I write novels has really been influenced by the way I write television. I think if you look at the Jack Reacher novels, and the Janet Ivanovich books, and some of the best-selling novels, they're taking techniques they've learned from watching television, I believe, and applied it to the craft of writing mystery novels and crime. And even if you watch HBO, where there are no commercials, or in other networks there are no commercials, the shows are still structured in the 4-act. The 4-act structure, when he says 9 acts, or it's still a 3 acts broken down into little pieces. But even those shows that don't have commercials are still written in that structure because you want it, you feel it, you need it, and if it's not there, you think something's missing from the show. And you find it stressful, but it's also what keeps you hooked. It's what keeps you from going up and going to the bathroom, or going and changing the channel, or doing something else. It's the enticement to get you to stay. What the hell is Abraham Lincoln doing in outer space? You stick around to find out.
How did y'all get started writing TV?
Well, I mean, like a lot of people, I mean, I just wanted to be a writer. I moved to LA and wrote screenplays and didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I had a friend who I'd gone to college with who was writing for Newhart. She taught me about, this is some years ago, in those days you would write a spec script for an existing show. You would write a sample script. She was working for Newhart, so I wrote a sample Newhart. And you were never going to get a job on the show that you wrote the sample for, because the people on that show know that show so well that any mistakes you make or anything that you repeat, whatever, they're not going to know. But other shows know that show, and so they read it and they think, oh, this is good, this is bad. Nowadays, they don't do that at all. Nowadays, you write your own pilot for a script, and they read that. I don't know why. If you did that in my day, you'd be considered crazy.
You want to stop for 1 second?
Yeah.
The reason they had you back in the day, dinosaurs roamed the earth, they had you write a spec episode, was one to make sure that you could capture the voice
of a television writer. Workaday television writer is writing in the style of the show or the showrunner. Writing like David Kelly or writing like Glenn and Les Charles. You have to be able to imitate it. Hopefully, bring your own stuff to it too, but be able to imitate that kind of voice and fit in with the show. There's no point in writing a great episode of Cheers in iambic pentameter. It just doesn't. It just doesn't work. You had to be able to do it. So anyway, I wrote a spec Newhart, and after 3 years, somebody at Cheers read it and liked it, and then they called me in, and I started out as writing a freelance Cheers. That was my first job. They did television.
I got into television in such an ass-backwards kind of way. I was a 19-year-old college student at UCLA, and I had a professor who wrote those big, bulky, Robert Ludlum-esque conspiracy thrillers. And I would read his manuscripts and criticize them and give him my point of view on the way these things are written and whether the sex scenes are realistic or not, even though I hadn't had sex. I was an expert on everything. And I would criticize all this stuff. And one day his publisher came to him and asked him if he'd write a men's action-adventure series. They don't exist anymore, but they were like the male equivalent of a Harlequin romance. The Destroyer, the Exterminator, the Defecator, the Drooler. They all had ER, OR at the end, and some guy with an enormous gun and explosions behind him and with gigantic hooters, on the cover. And my professor said that he wasn't dumb enough, desperate enough, or hungry enough to write something like this. But he knew somebody who was. And he recommended me. 19 years old. So I wrote a sample chapter and outline for a book called 357 Vigilante by Ian Ludlow. So I've been on the shelf next to Robert Ludlow, who's the #1 best-selling author on the planet at the time. And I figured if I had a cover with big boobs and explosions and shotguns, and there's his book with the hammer, the sickle, the Doric column, then they'd buy my book. They're in that aisle anyway. And Ian for Ian Fleming. So they go, Ian Ludlow. I think I read something by him. It wasn't bad. That they would think was familiar. So I wrote this book. It was published. It came out the same week this guy Bernard Goetz blew away some muggers on a New York subway train. Vigilantes were hot. New World Pictures bought the movie rights to my book and hired me to write the script. So I wrote the script, movie never got made, and I went on to do other things. But my agent suggested that I write a spec episode of the show and try to get into TV. So I wrote a spec episode of a show called Spencer for Hire about this complete fraud vigilante writer. I basically took the kind of life and turned it into a spec episode, write what you know. And my idiot agent did exactly what Phoef said you should never do. He sent my script to Spencer for Hire. And as it happened, they had a script fall out, and they were in hell. And the executive producer of the show went back to his desk, and he was in misery. And he's looking at the stack of specs that have been sent to him. And he actually saw the word Spencer for Hire written on the spine of one of the scripts. That was kind of strange. And he pulls it out, and he reads it, and I get this call. And it's like a year and a half after I've written the spec. Hi, this is Bill Yates, executive producer, Spencer for Hire. We'd like to shoot your episode next week, if that's all right with you. I was floored. And ended up writing 3 Spencer for Hire scripts after that, and my TV writing career was born. But you can't really imitate that. I mean, the lesson of that story is if you follow your dream and you work hard, and you put yourself around other people with similar interests, then you're in a position for good luck to happen. He's got Emmy Awards, Peabody Awards, Humanitas Awards. He shouldn't have to prove anything. He should just be able to walk in the room and get a job. And in some ways, it's a detriment. I find myself taking things off my resume. I don't want them to know I broke in Spencer for Hire. They're going to think I have a walker in a colostomy bag, and these are my teeth. You know,
It's a little bit that way with Cheapers. I remember there was an episode of Scrubs where they had a character who was a Cheers writer, an old Cheers writer. And he was this old man. Hey, nobody on Cheers was that old. Even the old people on Cheers were that old.
Each show has its own rhythm. Like you work on David E. Kelly shows or Aaron Sorkin shows where they're delivering huge amounts of dialogue very fast. So you learn the rhythms of your actors. Like, I did a show, Sequest. It was an hour-long show, and it turned out that 44 pages, 43, was just right because we have one line of action. The Sequest moves to the ocean. Well, that's 5 minutes of special effects and stuff. So
And an action sequence
Yeah.
and all that. They have a spectacular fight. It takes that much.
So is that a major worry or a minor worry?
you discover that as you're doing a show. So like Diagnosis Murder, you guys haven't seen it because you're all 4 or too young. But that show, you know, the actors actually delivered the dialogue pretty fast. So it was an hour-long series, but our scripts are about 68, 69 pages. Because we had a lot of dialogue and they moved through it quickly. I did another show, Martial Law. It was an action show, and our scripts were 45, maybe 46 pages. It really depends on the unique voice and.
I just did a TV movie with Tom Cavanaugh for Hallmark, and it was up like 100 pages.
Show has unique production restrictions. A budget. We are shooting each episode for $1 million, $1.3 million. And by virtue of the way our show is budgeted, we can only do 4 days on location and 3 days on our standing sets. And none of the locations can be more than 40 minutes away from our soundstage. And our lead actor will not go anywhere beyond 20 minutes from his home in Malibu. Because we have all these other limitations. And we can only afford 3 top-of-show guest stars and 2 other one-line parts. And we can only have 1 night. So you have all these budget limitations that are imposed before you start being creative. So not only do you have to come up with a story that fits your unique show, you have to come up with one that can be produced. So it's like writing a novel where you can sit in your office in your pajamas and write whatever comes to you. When you're doing a TV show or movie, you're not just writing a story. You're writing a story that has to be created in the real world. You type it, someone has to make it happen. And there are budgetary, weather, location, all kinds of restrictions that come into play, which is why Phoef and I, or any TV writer or film writer, is constantly rewriting. You are rewriting for the realities of the world that the show is shooting. You're precious about your words, and you're not a collaborator, and you can't be flexible. You cannot work in television or film. I remember one lesson I got as a very young new writer. I had a scene in a script where the hero is driving at night, and a cat runs across the street, and he has to slam on the brakes to avoid hitting the cat. And it's at night. And my executive producer came to me and said, "Congratulations, Lee, this cost us $250,000. What? He says, "A night shot in a car with a cat. So we have to get a stunt car. We have to put that car on a trailer. We have to light a street. We have to get a stuntman and a double for the driver. We have to get a trained cat. We have to get a cat wrangler." And he starts telling me how much those 3 little lines cost. But then he told me a trick, which is, "I want you to put something like this in every script." Now, why? So I can have something to sacrifice. When they tell me the script is over budget, I'll say, "Well, I'm not losing the scene where he almost runs over the cat." And the studio was like, "Demand it." And he'll say, "Okay, fine." And he'll take it out. He never wanted it in the first place. So we're always thinking like, underwater scuba diving scenes with sharks, you know, or other stuff that he would fight for. It's really crucial to this script. We have that scene with, you know, the giant orgy of aliens, whatever, and then say, no, it could just be one person. No, it's an orgy, and then we take it all out and get what he really wanted in the first one. You know, one alien with a lot of makeup instead of a room full of aliens with a lot of makeup. When you write for a living, you don't have the. And here's another thing about TV versus books. This is not quite accurate, but for the sake of this discussion, every Monday they start shooting a new show. Every Monday. If they don't have a script, 250 people are going to be standing with their fingers up their nose, waiting. And every hour that they don't have a script, it's costing the production of $200,000 an hour, something like that. So there's enormous pressure. Plus, you have a bunch of people working for you. The show, as much as directors and actors may piss on the scripts and piss on writers, the fact of the matter is, the gasoline that drives movies and TV shows is the script.
How has like the admissions like Netflix and Amazon and stuff changed? Like, has it made it harder, or has it made it easier, or like to write shows, or has it changed at all?
In some ways, it makes it easier because there's more places to sell to. I mean, how many shows are on the air right now? I mean, it used to be, you know, back when we started, there were 4 networks, and that was it. You know. Now there are. I mean, I'm constantly hearing about a show that's in its 3rd year. That's a great show. You got to watch it, and I've never heard of it. You know, because there are so many shows. So in that sense, it's easier. On the minus side, they don't pay nearly as well as they used to, and also it's still hard. It's still hard to get somebody to put up enough money, because when you're pitching a show, you're basically saying, I've got an idea that's so good that you should spend millions of dollars on it, and that's hard. You know, that's really hard.
We're talking a season of television now costs close to $100 million.
Yeah.
So you better have a damn good idea. But I found less Netflix and Amazon, all that being a problem, as reality shows. Particularly if you're doing a nighttime soap. You notice now, you look at Dynasty that's on the CW and these other soaps, and they don't compare to what's happening in the Trump White House or what's happening on the Kardashians. It's hard to get excited about fake interpersonal drama when you can watch reality shows with people willing to eat bugs to win $1 million or whatever. You're competing now against so many other types of entertainment that have heightened the climax that we were talking about, the stakes that of the scene. That makes it harder. And you're competing against big tentpole movies, and you're also competing against video games or computer games. You know, am I going to watch a Private Eye show, or am I going to go play Warcraft? It's holding the attention of a viewer.
And also, now the movies have pretty much gone to where they're nothing but superhero movies and remakes of 80s comedies, that the really talented writers and directors for movies are going to TV. So, you know, you're competing against Martin Scorsese or Scott Frank or, you know, people who are, you know, at the top of their game.
So you did shows about law and, you know, things like that. How much outside knowledge or outside research do you have to do in order
Well,
to write about
Dave
something?
Kelly used to, at least at that time, he staffed his show with sort of, half of us were television writers, we met a lot of comedy writers, and half of them were lawyers. So, and we become writers, and if you know, a legal consultant. And that usually consisted of you going up to the legal consultant saying, could this happen? He said, no, I think it could. But it could happen if you do this, that. No, it still couldn't happen. But it could happen if you did this. No, it still couldn't happen. Well, we're going to do it anyway.
I believe in write what you don't know, write what you fear, write what you want to be, write what you're scared of, write anything that isn't you, because then it forces you to be more creative and to reach out into areas that are going to challenge you. That's how I feel. The hardest thing about anything I ever write is what we call exposition. And that's explaining stuff, the backstory, the details. Exposition is never entertaining. Exposition is a black hole. It is very, very hard to find a way to have exposition come out in action and dialogue that's entertaining and fun, especially in books. So many authors just do what we call an exposition dump, and just and tell you things. I had an episode of Hunter once, where our heroes needed some information, and I had them go to the Hall of Records on Exposition Boulevard. And I thought that would never get through, and it did.
I'm just from the computer science background, from the technology point of view. So the big screen right now goes to like a 4K 120 frame, and the TV right now is any series is $80 investment, and then you have the special writers. From the smaller camera, the YouTube right now, see every day thousands, millions upload for that kind of small screen, low resolution, and then simple. What do you think from your expert point of view? Is any special writers for that kind of market yet? Is that something can be something in the future?
Writing for a particular type of screen definition?
Yes, for the YouTube kind of very
Well, no
low.
one's found a way, I mean, Funny or Die has incredible stuff on YouTube, but they haven't found a way to monetize it to keep it going. You're talking about writing for a specific
Basically, it's writers who are just starting out, who are trying to get in. That's one way to get in, get yourself seen. I don't think there's any way to make money at it. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's a good way to be seen, and for people to see you and think, well, I'd like to try that guy.
Yeah, right now
a
it's
funny story.
a lot of low quality. It's a tutorial, and it looks like no standard to take the.
But that's one of the challenges right now, is all the different screens with which people are interacting with entertainment. How do you write something that can move across all those platforms and still be satisfying visually?
Usually they're very short too. Time, it's much harder to write a, say, 7-minute good thing than it is to write an hour good thing. It's much harder. I mean, you have to come up with enough that the beginning, middle, and end is going to grab you and all that sort of thing.
These are the kinds of things that interest me. So I know you can't always be, sitting at your favorite chair at home to write. You probably write on planes and in bathrooms and things like that. So how do you, I know you said one of your motivators is look at the mortgage, right? But how do you, when you're on a plane or you're in a room full of other writers, get into that, like, shut out the world space?
Yeah,
Just a personal.
It's funny. I am so used to writing with chaos around me. But when I'm at home, Lee doesn't understand this. When I'm at home, I write in the living room with the TV on and the dog running through the room.
I could never, I can't.
And because I need to have stuff to tune up. If I'm up, in my office, which my daughter's taking over now, but if I'm up in my office and it's quiet, silent, I need to go out to a coffee house with Leffa, and I need activity around me so that I can zone it out.
In order to entertain myself, in order not to hate what I do, I have to believe that what I'm writing is not a cliche. If I read it and I've seen it before, I can't write it. I can't turn it in. I can't. But also, if I write something that's an original, if I write something that's a cliche, I won't sell that book or that script. I won't make the sale. I won't work. You have to be original if you want to survive. Now, granted, if you're doing a private eye show or a forensic show, there are tropes that you have to service. There, the challenge is, where do I find originality within a formula that everybody expects? You don't want to break them. If you're doing a police procedural, there are rules to a police procedural. If you're doing police procedural, there are rules to a whodunit. There are rules to different kinds of storytelling. So it's how can I be original within the framework of those rules? And sometimes those rules are what bring out the very best because you're trapped.
On a question about adapting back and forth between novel and screenplay, do you find one way more challenging than the other? For example, if you've written a screenplay but you're adapting it for a novel, you had to go through that process.
I mean, going from screenplay to novel, I did that with the first, I read a series of novels about a guy named Crush, who's a bouncer and a bodyguard in LA. And I originally wrote it as a screenplay, and then I wrote it as a novel. And I just looked at the screenplay as a really, really, really detailed outline, And go to it every day to know that what I was writing, but, you know, obviously you flesh it out and you make it more full and all that, but it was easier to go that way. Then I've done the other one too. I've adapted novels into screenplays, and that's a little harder because you have to, you know, reimagine the story
The most difficult writing I've ever done in my life was I was hired to adapt Rex Stout's Nero Wolfe novels for television. Remember I gave you an example about how sitting in a chair is really boring and how exposition and depth? That's all Nero Wolfe is. Nero Wolfe is a morbidly obese detective who never leaves his brownstone. And he has his assistant, Archie Goodwin, who goes out and brings all these clues together. And then all the suspects gather in Wolfe's living room, and he, in this wonderful oration, reveals who the killer is. Or Archie comes back and reports things to him. So you have a show that's built all around people sitting in chairs, that's what they hate party scenes, 17 people in a room, and Nero Wolfe all talking about stuff that happened in the past. It's all exposition. By its nature, in television, as we said at the very beginning of this discussion, you have to show or tell.
This also is another thing about writing for television or movies. Sometimes they will throw you a note like that just seems so completely insane, and often is, or just so completely off the wall that changes everything, and you have to do it. I mean, if you're a working writer, if you're hired to write for a show, if you're hired at a working level, you have to do it. You have to find a way to make it work. Sometimes you can make the show a lot better. Sometimes it was a great episode. It was a wonderful episode. Sometimes it just makes it different. Sometimes it makes it worse. But you have to be able to, you have to be flexible enough to go with those changes.
When you are a writer for hire on a show, you are working for the showrunner. You're basically a carpenter building a bookshelf at someone's house. You may know how to make a beautiful bookshelf, but if the homeowner wants it a certain way, you've got to build it to the best of your ability the way the homeowner wants it. TV shows establish a franchise. The showrunner, his job is to maintain that franchise. He says, here is what my show is. Here are the rules of my universe. Here's how my characters behave. In the world of Monk, there is no forensics. In the world of Monk, the captain of detectives and an outside consultant walk through a crime scene contaminating evidence, and the crime is solved by behavioral clues. In the world of CSI, deduction doesn't exist. It's all about the forensics. In Law and Order, it's all about the system and the law. Every show has its unique take and point of view, unique rules. And it's a contract you make with you, the audience. Hi, welcome to my show, St. Elsewhere. Here's how we tell medical stories. Here's the kind of stories you're going to see every week. Here are the kind of stories you're not going to see. So here's what we do. If you like it, we hope you keep watching. So you do. And it's a binding agreement. When a show breaks that franchise agreement, there's a term for it, jumping the shark. It's when they lose you. It's when they don't do what you expect. It's the moment on Happy Days when Fonzie was water skiing and he leaped over a shark. It wasn't the show. It wasn't Happy Days. It wasn't the franchise. That's why the phrase jump the shark is caught on. A showrunner's job is to say, here's the voice of the show, here's the stories we tell, to hire writers who will tell stories that way, to hire directors who will tell stories that way, to design the sets so the sets reflect the franchise of the show. A showrunner is involved in every aspect of the show. He decides the wardrobe. He decides locations. He hires directors. He does the final cut. He does the music spotting. He does everything. Now he'll delegate to a whole bunch of other people. But ultimately, your job, no matter what you're doing on the show, is to further his or her vision. A creative lesson would be tight. Cut, be lean. If the line does not reveal character or move the story forward, cut it. And sometimes that means cutting your favorite stuff. If it does not do it, it should not be in the script of this story. You sometimes have to kill your babies in screenwriting.
Or another example is, I mean, looking at it from another point of view, it's that you don't really matter. That you when I've done screenplays where I was in development, the studio, the producer, they're calling you, they're focusing on you, you're the whole thing. And as soon as it gets like it's gonna get made, they usually let you go and bring in another writer. Or at the very least, they listen to everybody but you. I mean,
I have a publishing company. It's going into its 4th year. We've published 100 titles, 2 of which are by this gentleman over here, Jim Sanderson, and I am honored and delighted and privileged to be able to call him my friend and to be his publisher. He's written 2 incredible books, that El Camino del Rio and La Mordida, that we've republished. They've fallen out of print, and we're relaunching them for a new generation of readers.
initially when I started writing the novel, when I started wanting to write a novel, I'd written scripts for years. And in scripts, the descriptive part of it is as bare bones as you can possibly make it. You know, it's just, you know, he goes to the door, he answers the door, and you know, so it's just, so you read it quickly and you get the gist of it. So, for one thing, writing in complete sentences really threw me for a loop. I haven't even done that for a long time. And, but I felt that the real appeal was being able to get into the characters' heads, being able to say what the characters are thinking. You can't do that in a screenplay unless you can do it with voiceover, and that's not, I mean, you can do that, but it's not something you want to do a lot. But you can go into the characters' heads. That was great. I sort of thought the exposition would be easier in a book because you could just write it out, but I quickly learned that you can't just tell the audience, I mean, if the reader, a big chunk of exposition, you still have to do it in dialogue, you still have to do it in the course of the story. But basically, when it came down to it, most of it is scenes between characters talking, trying to get things from each other, and that was the same. So I mean, in general, I felt that it was like writing a script, but you go in deeper. I would say that.
You can fall into in a book that you can't fall into with a script. In a book, it's very easy to fall into what he called exposition, to explain everything, to tell you what everyone's thinking, and that can be so easy, and it's death. In a script, every scene, every line, every moment has to reveal character and move the story forward, or it's cut. Because a script is a set number of pages, you have a set amount of time to tell your story on screen, there can be no fat, it has to be lean. Make the writing invisible.
Yeah.
Don't call attention to the writing. You want writing that is so tight that you forget it's there and you just get lost in the world that you're in. You don't want to suddenly have the reader stop to say, oh, that's an interesting metaphor, or that's an interesting description. To her, that ruins the illusion. Too many writers now, because it's so easy to self-publish, they do. Your book isn't edited, you don't have the experience, and it just comes off as amateur and not worthy of being on the same shelf as Robert Ludlum or James Patterson. And also, usually the covers aren't as good, and it looks terrible. So yes, self-publishing is great, and I've done it. Other writers
And I've done it.
You have to make sure your book is professionally edited, that it's tight, that the cover is every bit as good as the covers by the professional authors, and that you can be proud of it. There's no typos. It's a great book. It's been great for some authors. Some authors have really exploded.
And you
in
were
popularity.
the Martian, right?
Yeah.
That was...
But for every author who's broken out, there have been several 100,000 who haven't, because the other problem is discoverability. You want word of mouth to build about your book. It's not going to build if your book isn't terrific. The other thing is, it's not enough just to write one novel and self-publish it. You better have another one 6 months or a year later, because it's building a brand.
To take shape, I press the button.